Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kevin Barenblat. I'm going to be the moderator of this session. I am co-founder of Fast Forward. I started Fast Forward a dozen years ago to empower nonprofits that are building tech and AI for humanity. When we started, the term tech nonprofit didn't even exist, and now we've watched it to grow to over 1,000 organizations today. It's growing fast, and over the last few years, a new genre of nonprofits has emerged: AI-powered nonprofits. These organizations, they're not just using AI for efficiency gains. AI is how they deliver impact. AI is helping refugees access translations, scaling personalized learning, strengthening climate resilience, and so much more. So at Fast Forward, we field a lot of questions about responsible AI from both from nonprofits and from funders. The reality is AI outputs mirror the practices and values that we build into them. And if we want safe AI, we need responsible AI practices. So I'm really excited that we're here today to be part of Project Evidence convening to talk about how nonprofits across the sector, not just AI-powered nonprofits, are addressing safe and fair practices. We have a very esteemed panel of folks. I thought to get us started, I would give them each a chance to introduce themselves and name what values you bring to the conversation. What principles and commitments are driving your work, and how do you ensure those values show up when you use AI? Let's start with Afua.
Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning to you all, depending on when and where you are watching our chat today. First of all, thank you to Project Evident for the invitation to be a part of this panel. I'm really excited to spend the next hour chatting with you all about really how we make AI safe and fair in practice. When it comes to the values that I put into place, the work that I do through A&B Advisory Group, it is really centered around honoring expertise. And so that means we honor a wide range of expertise: technical expertise, lived experience, non-technical expertise. And we believe deeply that all of that must come together in order to develop, design, and deploy AI in safe and fair ways. I think another value that I hold deeply is the fact that we are all equally experts in the future. The future is ours for the making. So the future of AI is not inevitable, and the decisions that we make today, the ways that we decide to show up for our teammates, for our family members, and for ourselves when it comes to creating AI and deciding how we use it in practice, that is what will shape the future of AI. And that is how we will help create an AI reality that we want in the future. Thanks.
Anna?
Yes, hi, excited to be here. Thank you so much for hosting us. Thanks, Project Evident, but also Kevin, as a fellow nonprofit founder, I've been really inspired by what you've built, and I think you offer a lot of value to the sector at large, and I think that's really inspiring. So my name is Anna Lerner. I'm technically Swedish, but I've lived around the world for the last 20, 25 years, currently residing in Spain. Some 5 years ago, I founded Climate Collective. It's a small and mighty nonprofit that really works to make sure that technology serves nature and climate outcomes. And when it comes to sort of the values that I bring to the table, I want us to talk about safe and green AI. For me, it's really important that AI operates within planetary boundaries, but also that AI helps us rejigger society so that we all support positive and nature and climate outcomes. So that would include things like building resilience amongst people, but also supporting equitable outcomes. Climate justice, I think, is a really important topic. So, both pointing AI towards these positive green outcomes, but also making sure that AI doesn't undermine the progress we've already done as societies in terms of sustainability. So those would be my leading values as I enter this room.
And Rakesh?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rakesh, Vice President of Product and Technology at Catalyst Exchange. I lead the teams that is responsible for building and evolving our tech platform that connects nonprofit with a vetted network of providers. Most of my experience has been software engineering and product development across technical consulting, insurance, public safety, ed tech, and for the last almost 1.5 years, I've been in the social sector. Now, in terms of the value I bring to this conversation is practical ground perspective on using AI across very different teams, ranging from those who are hesitant to adopt at all and to others who are eager to automate almost everything. And the core principle that guides my decision is impact. I find myself asking the question in different situations, the AI use case that we're talking about, would it positively influence day-to-day work of my colleagues and the people and the customers that we serve? Beyond that, I'm deeply committed to intentionality and diverse voice in how we implement AI. This means making sure that diverse perspectives are part of decision-making process. And also it means that we don't just optimize for efficiencies, we also optimize and care about the trust, equity, and real-world usefulness. In practice, that shows up in different ways, being thoughtful about where we use AI. Does it really add value? Being transparent about how it is used, and making sure that the people who are affected by these tools have a voice in how those are designed and deployed. That's a bit of context from my side. Happy to go deeper as we get into the questions. Back to you, Kevin.
This is perfect. Thank you all for sharing. I think it's important for us to ground this conversation with values. It's the basis for any strong AI policy. When nonprofits approach us looking for help developing an AI policy, our advice is usually to make the policies as clear as possible, crystal clear, demonstrating commitment to your mission and data privacy, security, ethical development all builds trust, transparency, and ultimately, we hope, better AI. So Rakesh, maybe can we start with you? I'm curious, what did the process look like for Catalyst Exchange to build AI guidelines that reflect your organization, and how have those guidelines evolved and shifted over time?
Yeah, happy to share. Thank you, Kevin. Just making sure that, I'm on unmute. So before I get into the details on the process on Catalyst Exchange, one thing I would want to highlight, and it may come up a couple more times as I go through my process, AI implementation is not a milestone. It's a journey. And it's a journey that you learn and work towards every day. And the best place to start is by creating that space for honest and balanced conversation. Not to how it all started, how we built it, and what has changed over time from AI policies at Catalyst Exchange perspective. This is almost a year back. Across the organization, people had already begun experimenting with AI, using it for notes, summaries, some operational tasks. There was a lot of excitement initially, but pretty quickly that turned into mixed signals. People were asking the questions, are we using the right tools? Is it safe? Is the data that we are putting into these tools, who else is going to be able to read this data? Is this environmentally right thing to do? So we had this aha moment where the energy was very high, but confidence wasn't high really. And that was when we realized we needed guidelines, something that could create shared understanding without really shutting down experimentation. So that's how we all got started at Catalyst Exchange. Now, in terms of the process, what we did to define the guidelines, the process actually was pretty collaborative, but there was an important start. We wanted to make sure that the executive team was fully bought in. At times, it's easy for a tech executive to be very excited and happy and try this new AI as the new shining object. But you want to make sure that the whole company and all the executives are aligned. So that's where we started with only one goal in mind, that let's agree basic principle that we are going to engage with AI thoughtfully, not avoid it. And that was very important, because there were questions that were still answered. Even as of today, there are questions that are not answered. All the questions are not answered. But as far as we had that commitment at executive level, then we started it next level down, and each team nominated their AI champions, not someone who actually had the most experience in AI, but someone who could bring different perspective. Tech brought the setup of tools, more tech understanding what was possible, what was not possible. Operations team brought questions around privacy and data. Customer success, customer support team brought in context into what does it mean for customers? Do we need to tell them in advance that the meetings that we are doing are being recorded? Where else this data could be used? So all that context was taken into, and honestly, it was not the final document that made it so fun. It was this kind of communication and the loop and the challenging each other, the conversation that made it very exciting. There was good amount of healthy tension, excitement versus caution, speed versus responsibility. And it's interesting to note that even during the process of defining the policy, we were using ChatGPT to draft it to give us a couple different versions. And again, that was part of it. But the most important part of it was across the team, folks reacting on it, challenging it, drafting it for better. So we learned quickly also that the perfect version of guideline does not exist. That overly complex, cover every little scenario was actually least useful. Those are the kind of policies or guidelines that we felt could be left into employee handbook and no one would ever come back and refer to those. So we decided to go with a high level, more flexible, open, that we can learn and adopt over time. The core principles that we landed on start with awareness, and awareness for all, not restriction. Be thoughtful about the data. Use AI to augment thinking, not to replace it. And treat it as a journey. And I know I'm repeating it, but AI is really changing. What I knew last week had changed. There is so much amount of literature that I typically go and just read on TLDR because it's just hardly impossible to follow through all what is happening. In terms of last part of your question, Kevin, how has it evolved over time? So at high level, the shift has been for us moving from should we be using AI at all to how do we use it well? So we're talking more about the use cases rather than is this allowed? Is our data safe? And those questions were valid questions and needed to be answered at the foundation level. But instead of talking whether to use AI, teams are now starting to focus on very specific use case. So the evolution has been from caution and uncertainty to more like everyday practical use. So to summarize, we started with curiosity and some uncertainty. So I think it's important to understand that's a healthy way to look at and get started with it. We build guidelines collaboratively, not top down. We kept those simple and principle driven, and we are evolving those based on real uses, not just the theory. And that's our AI guidelines journey. Happy to get into more details as we get to questions. Back to you, Kevin.
That sounds great. Yeah, I love how interactive and collaborative your process was, and it sounds like it's really evolved over time. And it is hard to keep up. AI is changing so fast. Um, we tried similarly here to craft our policy together. It's definitely an iterative process. As they posted in the chat, we even created an AI policy builder tool that walks organizations through the process. It's like a chatbot that gets to know your organization's mission and values and scope and AI usage and policy needs. And then using AI, it generates AI policy for your team to review and have conversation around. Rakesh, as you're talking about, it can be a very interactive and collaborative and team process. And the goal is that like the policy that we help create covers everything from governance and privacy to risk management, ethics, which then you can review as a team and revise and publish. Um, Anna, I'd love to know, like in your day-to-day, you work, I think exclusively with climate and sustainability organizations. I'm curious if you can share with us more about like what kind of hesitations around AI you hear from the climate community, and how are those kinds of organizations building AI guidelines with those hesitations in mind?
Yeah, I mean, great questions, and I think very, very timely, particularly given sort of the noise that we're hearing today with sort of Gen AI developing so rapidly, and the strain that that's putting on actual physical infrastructure, particularly in the United States. So I would say yes. First of all, we work mostly with climate decarbonization, nature conservation, biodiversity, climate resilience organizations. So like anyone that falls into kind of like sustainability, environment, that bucket. And that is obviously the means that they come to us as an organization with a very clear mandate and mission around, supporting a healthy planet, or supporting resilience amongst ecosystems or people. But increasingly, we're seeing inbounds from organizations that are working on public health or education and other areas where they like their values around maybe strengthening livelihoods of the communities they support, or health outcomes, or mental health of young people actually starts to intersect. And when it comes to AI use, this starts to intersect more and more with environmental concerns. So it's becoming a bit of a wider ecosystem than maybe we designed ourselves. I would say that the hesitations that we hear most frequently fall into three main categories. One is like the environmental footprints of AI, right? I think, just for simplicity, I like to think about the physical footprints and then the handprints. And the handprints can obviously be really positive when we use it in service of nature and climate, but it can also be quite negative in terms of environmental impact. So first of all, the environmental footprints. And just, I mean, global emission is one thing, that might not be sort of top of mind for most community organizations and nonprofits in the world, but we're seeing intense concern regarding local impacts and vulnerable populations, specifically a strain on local water tablets and power grids where data centers reside. I think the massive expansion of sort of beyond the grid power sources for data centers, where it comes to kind of like rapid deployment of natural gas, is really concerning for an air pollution perspective. So that's one of the bigger buckets that they come to. And I want to, make sure that we also remember that this could be a positive aspect, right? We can make sure that you can use the growth in electricity demand to sort of accelerate clean energy deployment. So it doesn't have to be negative, but that's definitely one of the big concerns that we're hearing. And then the kind of the negative handprint, some people call these the enabled emissions, where there's fear that AI will be sort of co-opted for anti-climate purposes. This could be related to misinformation based on the data that the models are trained on, but also, leveraging AI to optimize fossil fuel extractions, or really driving hyper consumerism and fast fashion through predictive marketing. That's kind of a second bucket of concern. And then the third one is this kind of the lack of transparency, the data gap. Assessing the true impact, like kind of determining if it will be positive or negative for society and climate is, practically impossible, because we still lack transparent, standardized data on the full life cycle of energy and water intensity of specific AI models. So those are sort of the three big kind of concerns that people are having. Many come to us and say, as a green organization, as a conservation organization, is it really responsible for me to use AI given its heavy environmental footprint? And there, I just really want people to think about, there's a difference between kind of my individual footprint, where, everything taken together of all the environmental footprint I have as a person or as my organization, like our use of AI is probably a fairly small part of that. But on a systemic level, on a systems level, all of us put together, we will have a really big impact on the footprint of AI. So I think, as an individual, don't shy away from using AI because you're concerned about the environmental impact, but instead use some tactics to make sure that your use is actually a little bit green. And I'll get to those tactics here. So you asked kind of what are organizations doing? Are they building policies or kind of what's good practices? I will say a general trend we're seeing is that organizations are opting for principles, kind of like sustainability principles or green principles, over kind of mandating strict policy. And this is partly a reflection of the lack of data we have, but also how fast technology is evolving. So most of our partners that we run through our capacity building works or our tech accelerators, they're really adopting practical, kind of more values-based principles. And we really focus on recommending three core themes at Climate Collective. One is match the tool to the task at hand. Don't take a Ferrari to the grocery store if it's like in your neighborhood. Most of us don't need to clean up our emails with, the latest, most advanced Claude model. Instead, prioritize small or specialized model over these masses of LLMs, and really use AI only when the efficiency gain outweighs the compute cost. So like, be smart about the demand, like be smart about how you use it. The second one is really infrastructure integrity. This is probably like the easiest one in a way. Just make sure that your cloud provider is committed to 24/7 carbon-free energy. And, most of the model providers have fairly transparent sustainability reports where you can dig into this. And then the last one that we use to talk about is kind of like audit the why. Like, think about why you're using AI. Ask yourself, do I actually need AI for this task? If you're just trying to do a quick math calculation or trying to kind of summarize something fast, do you need AI for that? Or could you just use a calculator? Obviously, on a bigger scale, that ends up being quite impactful. So there are many times we could opt for a less advanced and complicated model and just kind of be smart about the demand. Those would be our three sort of recommendations. And really, in summary, the trend we're seeing is more like practical, value-based principles rather than very rigid policies.
Yeah, I love that. Like thinking about the climate implications of AI and balancing that responsibility with ensuring nonprofits have access to the best possible tools to drive impact. At Fast Forward, we've for a while joked about how nonprofits are often expected to solve 21st century problems with 20th century tools. And we do feel like that when that happens, community miss out on faster help, smarter targeting, preventative interventions. So I like how you all are helping organizations strike that balance. Afua, I'd love to turn to you. I know your work around responsible AI often intersects with change management, the human part. How does your work look different when you're consulting organizations that are building AI from scratch versus organizations that are implementing others' AI tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. My work with organizations, I've had the privilege of working with nonprofits who are of various sizes, from small teams, about 10 people, to large organizations of a couple of hundred people. And so with those varying size of organizations, there are also varying sizes of tech teams and differing objectives. Sometimes when people say we're working on AI, it means that a handful of people might have a Claude license, um, and they will be using that for whatever tasks that they deem necessary or interesting or worth experimenting for. And sometimes when people say they're working on AI, it means that they're actually building training data, they're building and validating their own models, they're doing the user acceptance test, and then rolling out the tool, and have developed an ongoing evaluation and monitoring platform for the AI themselves. So I think one of the things that can be challenging when we talk about nonprofits and AI is that there is a wide range of what we mean and what organizations can mean when they are using when they say that they are using AI. So to get to your question, which is the difference between organizations who are more customizing AI tools, existing AI tools for their environment, excuse me, versus organizations who are building AI tools and building AI models. I think what is the same is that both conversations require, both sets of activities require a clear understanding of where your organization's values are and where your organization goals are. If you don't understand what your organization is trying to accomplish, or you're not clear, and by you I mean your organization together, do not have a consolidated view as to what the goal is for not just the AI, but for whatever program it's supposed to help, whatever process it's supposed to help. AI is not going to magically make your organization more efficient. So whether you are building or customizing tools, if you're saying we're rolling out AI tools, we're developing an AI solution, you need to make sure that everyone is on the same page as to what the ultimate programs related, operational related goal is. I think that's the most important thing. Now, if you are fortunate enough to have the budget and the expertise in house, or with perhaps some consultants, to be building your own tools, I think there it's really important to really consider what training data you are pulling in and what you have access to. You can Training data is a wonderful opportunity to gain insight into how your organization works, how the world broadly thinks about whatever issue area, but it is also an opportunity, shall we say, or the reality is it is one of many places that bias can be inserted into the system, and that is bias for how different subpopulations are treated by the data, who is represented, who's not represented, who's represented accurately, who's represented inaccurately, and how you sort of correct for that. Training data can also be a wonderful place to make sure that you are involving the different types of expertise that I mentioned is a value for us at A&B Advisory Group. So I worked with an organization, quill.org, over the years. I know you at Fast Forward are familiar with quill.org. They're an educational tech organization, and they built some of their own training data in part by using some of their teacher council, which has real teachers that they already had access to from all across the US, teaching in different school districts and different cities, different types of schools. And by using the teachers, they were able to then, using the teachers' information as that training data, it's a way to build in that real lived expertise of the actual experts, of those teaching experts, into the model itself from the very start by updating the training data. Now, if you're not creating training data from scratch and you're not creating the model from scratch, you want to make sure that you are still feeding your AI tools that you're using whatever information is relevant to your organization. When you do that, you want to make sure that you have um, privacy and access controls in place. You want to be considering what is available for the AI tools to use within the organization, as well as what of that information would be made public and would be used as training data for the broader tool. I say often that caring about people in this decade, in 2026, is caring about their data. It's caring about the technology that's being used. And so you as nonprofits want to make sure that you're treating that data with care, which means that you're securing it and making sure that only the right people have access to that data. And then the final thing that I would mention is even as you create organizational policies around AI, I've done a lot of work to help organizations write their first Gen AI policy documents, which I think is really important. I think it is important also to make sure that you create an environment where it is safe for people to experiment. And you can use AI adoption as a way to push your organization to really adopt a continuous improvement mindset. This world requires flexibility. The world today looks very different than it did yesterday from an AI standpoint, but also from a variety of other issues. If we're not building into our organizations a way to be truly iterative, to experiment, and to allow ourselves to repeatedly evolve, it will be challenging to be successful. And AI is just one piece of that bigger picture.
Yeah, we did a report last year, like an AI for humanity report, and we did find this difference between the groups that are like using AI versus those that are building AI. The ones that are using AI, about a third had a policy in place versus the ones who are building AI had about 2/3 had a policy in place, which you might argue is still not enough. um, we got the sense that like part of the difference is like that the back office work is viewed as lower risk, um, but the tools that people are building to advance their impact are um, there needs to be more thought and policy and discussion and collaboration that goes into those. It's been really fun hearing everyone's perspectives. We have a lot of questions that I'm excited to dive into. As Project Evidence pointed out during today's event, AI is transforming the nonprofit sector faster than pretty much anyone can keep up, and certainly than the policies and guidelines can keep up. So it's really helpful for us to have shared frameworks and understanding about how nonprofits are thinking about responsible AI, the data, the design, and the community impact. Would love to turn to these questions. We have one that has 3 upvotes. Maybe we start with that. Roman's asking, where do you see the biggest risk today, in the AI models themselves or in the decisions organizations make using them?
I guess I can jump in here to start, and we'll then allow my co-panelists to come up with much more coherent and powerful answers, I'm sure. But I think the answer to the question is that they are equally important. In order to have responsible AI tools, and this honestly is true for any responsible technology, the opportunities for mistakes as well as the opportunities for success are evident at every stage of the process, from how you conceive of the idea and you set your overall goals to how you are designing the tools, how you actually develop the tools, and then actually how you deploy the tools. So there's risk at every level, but there's opportunity to manage the risk at every level. I think the question or the answer to this question probably depends more on how much control you have over which stages of the process. If you're an organization that is customizing tools or making do, well, you don't have that much say into what the overall tool looks like, with how the overall LLM was trained, perhaps, but what policies you put into place internally to say, here are things that we're using AI on, here's what we're not using AI on, here's how we disclose, here's when we don't need to disclose, here's what data is able to be fed into the system, here's what data has to stay out. Those are the decisions you have the ability to control. And so more of your time should be spent on that. If you're someone who's building AI from scratch, you've got the opportunity to control some of those design decisions, how model weights look like, what that depends on, what you allow to be done in your systems. I think to some of what Anna's mentioned, what's allowed can influence climate applications and others for some of these tools and things like that. So if you're building tools, then you have the opportunity to also do some of the risk management on some of that development side as well.
Yeah, I mean, just jumping in there to build on what you're saying, Afua, because I really love that. I also think there's kind of a parallel to sort of general climate action, climate movement is also like you can vote with your wallet, like you can influence the way that this sector is shaped by the decisions you make as a consumer. Yes, we're kind of small compared to the big AI labs, but together there's lots of us, and we can be vocal and sort of claim a seat at the table for how this develop, like how this technology impacts society. I love MacArthur Foundation, you know, the CEO. He keeps saying like, this is not happening to us. We have agency. Together we can influence the way we want this to shape. So that's on an individual level. Then I think about as an organization, as a nonprofit, like in my case, my nonprofit, we're more focused on kind of building or unlocking new tech tools for the positive handprints when we realize that, most of the organizations in my sector are central to actually influencing the footprints, making sure that the footprints are like the negative footprints are mitigated and then kind of influence the trajectory of how these technologies are evolving. And therefore we decided to add this whole like AI fluency training program, because I know that if you don't have a thorough understanding of this technology, what it does, what it doesn't, where it's suitable, where it's not, where it poses real risks, and how you mitigate them, how can you influence how it develops? How can you, if you're in a position of building policies or like, state level regulation or similar, like kind of standard setting, you need to understand what this is so that you can put the right standard in place or so you can demand accountability. So we spend a lot of time right now on just like upskilling the sector and helping the civil society, if you will, claim that seat at the table and come as an informed participant to the conversation. And I think that's also, I don't want to just kind of like give up and say, oh, like the AI labs are going to determine what this looks like. No, like, they're also people, like they also go home to their families in the evening, and we can make something really positive here together.
My inputs are same, ditto. And I think only thing I would want to add is if the balance is more essential for nonprofits in particular. We have limited resources, and while AI could feel like a new shiny object that everyone is running after, nonprofits hold a unique moral compass to all the questions, to ask the right questions. And I think as leaders, we could ask those questions. We could also enable our teams to ask the right questions. Tool can do only that much, but then it's uses and it's the use cases that we apply it to.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you all for helping us with that question. Roman has another one, but maybe we'll give Maya's question a chance. She's wondering about, this is probably for you, Anna, but the comment on the impact of AI on the environment and how it will impact health equity.
Yeah, I mean, I think this particular aspect is unfolding as we speak. I think there's a lot of talk about how we can power these data centers in a responsible way, how we can make sure that clean energy is what drives this transition. I recognize that a lot of these companies are under extreme pressure to build out new power generation solutions, and sort of data that's emerging seems like deploying these with standalone beyond the grid natural gas mini power plants, or even kind of like upcycled airplane engines, etc., seems to be kind of in the mix. personally, it's interesting. Like I started in the energy sector 20 years ago, so have kind of followed this for a long time. We're like, now we have two type of voices. One is the deep experts on energy, and then we have kind of the AI developers. And in some cases, some of these comments make me concerned, make me think that they actually don't understand fundamental kind of physics of energy sector or politics. So I think on the specific health aspect, like I would not want a natural gas, large or small power plant in my backyard. I would not want it anywhere close to where my kids go to school or where any friend I know lives. So if I would be a community that's potentially being introduced this solution, I would make my voice very clear and heard that that's not a good, that's not, I mean, that we have tons of evidence for years and years that that's not a good idea. We also know that renewables is faster, is cheaper, is cleaner and better for everyone's health. So like the fact that we're having this conversation in 2026 is a little frustrating. Yeah, so that I don't think we know the outcomes of this, but I really want to encourage us all to claim a seat at the table and make sure that this new sort of energy in the economy is put towards something that's positive. And this is kind of where, full circle, this is where the governance and the values of our organizations come in. And I would also encourage a lot of nonprofits to partner with these AI labs. It's a hard power balance to strike in terms of sort of negotiation power, obviously, but most of the time they're really open to partnership with really credible, solid organizations. So I think kind of coming closer to the decision makers in that way, influencing the direction of travel through partnerships, I think is a really powerful approach.
Thank you. And you touched on governance there at the end, which I think is a good segue to another question here from Roman about how do we ensure that the AI governance stays aligned with those real-world outcomes? So it's not just policies on paper, especially in complex systems like climate and social impact. I was curious if someone wants to tackle that one.
Oh, go ahead, Nana.
No, go ahead. I just thought kind of climate, it was me, but I feel like you have a better process perspective than I
Nope.
have.
Well, I know we're running short on time, so I'd love to make sure that we address the climate aspect of this person's question. So go ahead.
Well, I think going back to kind of making sure that you have a process in place that audits the work continuously is really important. And yeah, I mean, policy on papers are really not helpful for sure. What we're seeing, a lot of nonprofits are coming to us to learn the ins and outs about kind of responsible and sustainable AI, but then also get like guidance and talking points for their leadership so that when they are out in communities talking to funders or partners of theirs, that they have sort of the facts in order. So I actually think that we're getting at this from lots of different levels, but Afua, you're really kind of, this is your bread and butter. So handing over to you.
Well, I would just echo everything that you have said. I would also add a couple of things. So one is just reiterating what I think all of us have said already on this call today, is that it's an iterative process. And so that means that while there may be a temptation or perhaps even a best practice at your organization to write a policy once and never revisit it again in the future, you absolutely can't do that with AI. I won't speak to your greater policies, but certainly with AI, you should have in your organizational plan and your organizational strategy defined points to review your AI policy at least every 6 months to see what you need to tweak. I think the second thing to keep in mind is that your policies don't have to solve for every single scenario and every single possible outcome. You can make decisions to say, what are the 2 or 3 things that we want to focus on? and write policies that really allow for that, and then have policies that really document how people should report when something goes wrong and how you redress that. And so don't feel the need that as you have your policies to make them really document in stone a way to control for every single possible eventuality. You will be drafting policies for years to come if you do that. And then I think the third thing is to really think about what it means to responsibly repair when something goes wrong with AI, and what it means to disclose AI use. I think, especially when we are in the social impact space and we are, again, working with people, working with real impact on lives, and working with people's feelings of excitement and fear around AI, thinking about how your community is going to react to where you're using AI, where you're not using AI, and messaging that well, I think really honors the lived experience for the people that you're serving. I said only 3 points, but I'm going to take my fourth point, and I'm actually just going to restate and emphasize something Anna said earlier, and I think Rakesh touched on as well, is that you have choices. You don't have to use AI for everything all the time. You don't have to use a big fancy model that's been in a lot of headlines for everything all the time. You have choices. You can look at places like Project Evident, like N10, and other nonprofit and social impact and civil society specific places that are have trainings on AI to see what tools may be more responsible for your area of social impact, and you can choose those accordingly.
That's great. I think we're out of time. I really want to thank the panelists, Anna, Afua, Rakesh, for joining today to talk about safe and fair practice and AI guidelines and policies. I want to thank all of you who joined us and asked great questions. I want to thank Project Evident for making today happen. This was really great. We will be hanging out in the lounge if we can find our way there. So if anyone didn't get their question answered or wants to chat with any of us, we'll be hanging out there for the next 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you all.